I was 15 the day my mom sat me down in the kitchen and told me she was leaving. There wasn't some dramatic explosion, no shouting match, no tears. She just made herself a cup of coffee, sat across from me at the little round table with its chipped edge, and said, "Colin, you're old enough to figure things out on your own now. I'm moving in with Derek." That was it. Not, "Let's talk about how this is going to work." Not, "Here's what's going to happen with school, or rent, or food." Just, "Figure it out on your own." I remember sitting there, blinking at her over the steam of her coffee like I'd misheard. My cereal was getting soggy in front of me. I hadn't even finished my math homework. My voice cracked when I asked, "What about me?" She sighed like I was being dramatic. "You'll be fine. You're smart, Colin. I've done enough. It's time I lived my life." That was the first time I truly felt abandoned. Not in the abstract way a kid sometimes feels when their parent misses a baseball game or forgets a birthday, but really left behind. My mom had decided she was done being a mother, and that the role was optional now that Derek had a big house and a boat, and said things like, "We need to live in the moment." I didn't know what figuring it out meant back then. I was a sophomore in high school. I didn't drive. I didn't even have a proper job, just a weekend thing helping out at Mr. Leeds's garage for $20 under the table. I didn't understand how rent worked, or bills, or groceries, or paperwork. But apparently, none of that was my mom's problem anymore. She moved out 2 weeks later. No long goodbye. She left a box of canned food in the pantry, dropped off her house key on the kitchen counter, and disappeared. Derek's white Jeep was idling in the driveway when I came home from school. I watched her hug him at the curb like she was heading off on a cruise, not abandoning her kid. I didn't cry that night. I just sat on the living room floor with all the lights off, trying to listen for sounds that weren't there anymore. The squeak of her sandals on the tile, her laugh when she talked to her friends on the phone, the low hum of her favorite cooking show in the background. It was like she'd been erased. Like she'd died, only worse, because she'd chosen to leave. Over the next few weeks, things unraveled fast. The mortgage was unpaid. The electricity bill showed up with a pink notice stapled to it. I found out she'd canceled the auto payments on everything, even the water. When I called her in a panic, she didn't even pick up. The only message I got was a single text. "You'll figure it out. Be resourceful." That phrase haunted me for years. It felt like a scar on my pride. I don't know how I managed those first few months. I scraped by on garage work, skipped meals, showered at school, pretended everything was fine. When winter hit, the heat didn't work, and I slept in my hoodie under 3 blankets. I'd lie awake some nights thinking, if I disappear, would anyone even notice? But I was stubborn, angry even. I told myself if she wasn't going to take care of me, I'd take care of myself better than she ever could have. I started fixing old bikes and flipping them for cash. Then I started helping classmates fix their laptops. I learned to code from the public library's computers. I signed up for community college classes while finishing high school early. By 19, I was building websites for local businesses. By 22, I had my own small company. Nothing fancy, just me and a couple of freelancers grinding out e-commerce sites and payment systems. By 26, we had a proper office and employees. I hadn't seen my mom in over a decade, and I was okay with that. I didn't need closure. I didn't need her to apologize. I had built a life. Not a perfect one, but mine. I had a condo overlooking the river, a loyal little mutt named Moose, and enough money in the bank that I never had to think about pink notices again. I figured she'd moved on with her new family, with Derek and whoever else was lucky enough to be chosen. She probably didn't even remember the chipped kitchen table or the sound of my voice. But then she called. Out of nowhere. 10 years of radio silence. And suddenly, "Colin. Oh my gosh, baby, how are you?" I froze. I was standing in my kitchen in sweatpants, halfway through slicing an avocado. For a second, I thought it was a prank. I checked the screen again. Yep. Mom. She launched into this bubbly monologue like we'd just spoken last week. She said she saw my name in some local tech article. "Your little company's doing so well, huh?" She gushed, like I'd sent her quarterly updates or something. I didn't say much. Just let her talk. My stomach twisted as she kept using this chirpy, performative tone, like she was auditioning for favorite parent. She asked about my ventures and how crazy it was that her son had become such a success. And then she said it. "So, your little brother needs help with tuition." The words landed like a slap. I blinked. "Excuse me." She sighed, dropping the sugary voice. "Derek and I have been a little tight with money since he retired. We just didn't plan on college costs being so high, you know? And your brother, he really wants to go to this out-of-state school. I cut her off. My brother? Oh, Colin, don't be petty, she said, with a sigh like I was being difficult. You know what I mean. Derek's son. But we raised him since he was 10. He's family. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at the knife in my hand, wondering how I was supposed to process this. She hadn't asked how I'd survived after she left. She hadn't apologized. She hadn't even acknowledged what she did. And now, she wanted money? No, not for her. For him. Her new golden boy. I said it slowly, each word like a brick. Ask your husband. There was a pause. Then she said, coldly, is that really how you're going to be? And that was when something in me snapped, not in a loud, rage-filled way, but quiet, focused, like a storm pulling back before it floods the shore. Because I realized something then. She didn't just leave me behind. She replaced me. And now that I had value again, now she remembered I existed. I didn't hang up. Not yet. I had a question burning on my tongue. I asked it flatly, like I already knew the answer. Where were you when I got evicted from our house? Silence. Where were you when I had to shower in the school gym? She tried to stammer something, but I kept going. Where were you when I needed food, Mom? When I needed help? Her voice broke, just a little. Colin, I didn't know. I laughed. It came out bitter. You didn't care to. And before she could say another word, I hung up. I stood in that kitchen for a long time after. Moose curled up next to my foot, sensing something was off. I didn't feel triumph. Not yet. Just wait. Years of silence crashing down into a single phone call. But something had changed. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one on the floor, hoping someone would care. And I had no intention of letting that door open again. Not without a reckoning. Let's just say, that phone call was the beginning of something much bigger. I didn't hear from her again for about a month after that call. Which, if I'm honest, I expected. That phone call. That wasn't about reconnecting. It was a test. A poke. Like she was trying to see if the bridge was still intact, if she could just stroll back into my life like she hadn't burned it to ash 10 years ago. And when I made it clear the door was shut, she retreated. Probably hoped I'd call back with an apology. Or maybe she thought I'd wake up and feel guilty. But I didn't. What I felt instead was something colder. Not quite anger anymore. I'd burned through most of that in my early 20s. But something deeper. A kind of simmering clarity. Like when you finally stop hoping someone will change, and you start seeing them exactly as they are. Still, I thought maybe that was the end of it. Maybe she got the message. Maybe she and Derek and their new kid, your little brother, as she called him, would go back to their picture-perfect, yacht sailing, avocado toast lifestyle and leave me alone. But then the letter arrived. Yeah, an actual paper letter. In 2025. It was addressed to Colin Everett, which already made me bristle. She hadn't used my last name since she remarried and started calling herself Nancy Whitaker. I stood in the hallway of my building, envelope in hand, staring at her handwriting like it was a fossil dug out of a life I'd buried. Inside was a 2-page note, written in blue ink in her looping cursive. The first paragraph was sugar-coated garbage. Hope you're doing well. It was so nice to hear your voice again. We're all so proud of you. I almost laughed. Then came the real purpose. She wrote that Jason, her stepson, had been heartbroken when he found out I wasn't going to help with his tuition. She said he'd always looked up to me, always seen me as a big brother, and he was devastated by my coldness. I read that part 3 times. Big brother? I met the kid twice when I was 17. Once during Christmas, the one year she invited me to her new house before she stopped responding to texts, and again at some awkward birthday lunch that ended with Derek bragging about how Jason got into some elite private school because of our parenting. The next part of the letter made my hands shake. She said that Jason had always had dreams, and he'd been accepted to a school that would truly unlock his potential. She mentioned how Derek had supported my ambitions once, which was a lie. He barely tolerated me, and now it was my turn to support Jason's. And then the kicker. We've looked into your company's public records. It's clear you're in a position to help. It's just a few $1,000s per semester, an investment in your brother's future. Family helps family. I remember reading that last line while standing over my kitchen sink, my fingers curling into the paper like it might bite me. I folded the letter, tucked it back into the envelope, and threw it into the trash. But that wasn't the breaking point. That came later. Because about a week after that, I got a text from someone I hadn't seen since high school. A guy named Theo. We weren't close, more like project partners in math class, but I remembered him as decent, quiet, like photography. We hadn't spoken in years. His message was short. Hey, random Q. Is that your brother doing ads for your company? I blinked. What? I replied, what do you mean? He sent back a screenshot. It was a social media ad. One of those flashy Instagram reels with upbeat music and captions flying across the screen. The video showed a guy in a campus hoodie, walking through some college quad with a laptop bag slung over his shoulder. He was saying something about finding freedom through tech and working with startups. And right there in the caption, proud to intern for Everett Tech this summer. Huge thanks to my big brother for inspiring me to chase my dreams. Jason, Nancy's little brother Jason, using my name, my business, to make himself look like he was part of it. I stared at that screen like my brain had blue screened. I hadn't hired him. I hadn't spoken to him. I hadn't even known where he went to school. And yet, here he was, marketing himself as my intern, using the reputation I'd built from blood and sleepless nights and years of solitude to prop himself up like some shiny tech prodigy. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Was this some mistake? Some misunderstanding? Maybe he just made a post and didn't think I'd see it? But then I checked the tag. He had linked to my company's Instagram page, a page he should not have had access to. Except now, someone had made new posts. Posts I hadn't approved. One was a photo of Jason in a hoodie holding a laptop with my company's logo slapped on the screen. Another was a quote card with my name and a fake testimonial. Jason's work ethic is unmatched. He's going to change the world. I called my marketing lead, Jasmine, in a panic. Did you post this stuff? No, she said instantly. What the hell? I thought you did. No, I said. I didn't. We checked the logs. The posts were made from a backup admin account that had been created just a week earlier, under the name Nancy Whitaker. That's when my heart stopped. Nancy, my mother, had used a spare email address from years ago, one she had access to when she used to help me with my early business paperwork, to log in, create an admin account, and start planting fake promo content about her stepson. She used my platform to build him up. And she did it without asking, without warning, without permission. I was shaking, not just from anger, though that was there, white hot and rising, but from something else, a kind of humiliation, like I just found out someone had been sneaking into my house at night and rearranging the furniture to make it feel less like mine. I deleted the posts, revoked the admin, set up two-factor on every company account, and flagged the incident with legal. And then I called her. I don't even know what I intended to say. I think part of me still wanted an explanation. Still hoped, maybe, that this was some deranged attempt to reconnect, that it wasn't just exploitation. But the moment she answered, I knew. Oh, Colin, she said brightly. I saw the ad. Isn't Jason just so? Why did you lie? Silence. Why did you say he worked for me? She scoffed, like I was the one being difficult. It's just optics. Everyone does that these days. You know, marketing. Jason needed a boost. College is competitive. That's not marketing, I said, my voice flat. It's fraud. Oh, don't be dramatic. You broke into my company's accounts. She didn't deny it. Look, she said, tone shifting. You have so much, Colin. Can't you just be generous for once? He's your brother. No, I said. He's your project. You made your choice 10 years ago. Remember? Figure it out on your own. Her voice went cold. I didn't expect you to be so vindictive. That word lodged in my chest like a splinter. Vindictive? I had survived without a single dime from her. Had eaten ramen for 2 years straight. Had worked every weekend while she sailed around on Derek's boat and posted margarita photos on Facebook. And I was the vindictive one? I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said one sentence, and I meant it. You don't get to use me anymore. And I hung up. I didn't sleep that night. Because even though I'd shut her down, even though I had the power now, the leverage, the success, it didn't feel like a win. It felt like the final thread between us had snapped. But then, the next morning, I opened my email. And what I saw made my blood run cold. It was a message from a local education nonprofit I'd donated to in the past. Subject line, follow-up, confirming Jason Whitaker's internship for grant application. Inside was a full draft of a letter, from me, praising Jason's contributions to my company and endorsing him for a $15,000 scholarship. Attached was a forged signature. My signature. Nancy had gone further than I thought. And that was the real breaking point. Because now, it wasn't just about me. It wasn't about petty manipulation or guilt trips or fake Instagram posts. She had committed identity fraud. She had used my name, my reputation, to secure real money from a real organization for someone who wasn't even related to me. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel conflicted anymore. I felt focused. Because if she thought the kid she abandoned would sit back and stay quiet while she rewrote history in her favor, if she thought I'd let her steal from my company, from real donors, from the people I worked so hard to uplift, then she had no idea who I had become. Not yet, but she was about to. Because I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to hit back. Quietly. Legally. Strategically. And when it all unraveled, when the lies collapsed under the weight of the truth, she'd have no one to blame but herself. It's strange, the things you notice when your life starts to fall apart. Not in the dramatic, everything on fire way, but slowly, quietly, like the floor creaking before it collapses. After I found out about the forged internship and the fake letters submitted to the nonprofit, I did what any responsible adult would do. I lawyered up. I didn't yell. I didn't storm into her house. I sent my attorney everything, screenshots, timestamps, a notarized statement confirming I never authorized the internship, and a cease and desist order addressed to Nancy Whitaker. I told myself that was enough. That handling it through the proper channels meant I could move on with my life. That I'd finally done the mature thing. But what I didn't expect was how quickly and thoroughly my name would be dragged through the mud. It started small. An anonymous Twitter account claiming I was jealous of my brother's success and had sabotaged his future. A couple of vague subtweets, some untagged Instagram stories calling me spiteful and cruel for refusing to help family. I brushed it off. Trolls. Noise. People who didn't know the whole story. But then my company's email inbox started filling up. First, it was students reaching out to cancel their internship applications, saying they didn't want to work somewhere that punished people for needing help. Then a local journalist reached out asking if I'd like to comment on allegations of falsified claims and family harassment regarding a student named Jason Whitaker. That's when I knew Nancy had gone on offense. I didn't have proof, not yet, but it didn't matter. She'd found a way to spin it. To make it look like I had used my power to crush a poor college kid's dreams because of some bitter childhood grudge. And people ate it up. She framed me as the cold tech bro with a chip on his shoulder, and Jason as the bright-eyed underdog trying to make his way. The nonprofit rescinded the grant, citing conflicting information. The school quietly pulled Jason from their website's Spotlight program. But none of that mattered. The damage was already done. And the worst part? I started to believe it. Not the lies, not really, but the idea that maybe I had overreacted. Maybe I was still that angry, abandoned kid deep down. Maybe I just hadn't grown past it. I started replaying everything. The phone call, the letter, even that old phrase, figure it out on your own. Had I? I stopped sleeping, stopped eating properly. Moose would nudge me for walks, and I'd forget we'd already gone out that day. I showed up late to meetings, sat through pitches half distracted, and started handing off responsibilities to people I barely trusted. For the first time since building the company, I considered stepping down. Not permanently, just a break, a pause, something to stop the world from spinning. I booked a cabin 2 hours outside the city. No signal, no Wi-Fi, just me and a wood-burning stove. I left my laptop in the car. I brought one book and no charger. I needed space. I needed to remember who I was before all this. The first night, it snowed. I stood outside in my socks and hoodie, watching the flakes gather on the railing, and I realized something that nearly broke me. I didn't know what I wanted anymore. Not revenge. Not justice. Not even peace. I just wanted to feel like I wasn't trapped in someone else's story. Because that's what it had become, hadn't it? I wasn't Colin, the founder of Everett Tech. I wasn't the scrappy teen who survived on his own. I was Nancy's estranged son. Jason's bitter half-brother. A name in someone else's narrative. And that, more than anything, made me feel powerless. I stayed in that cabin for 4 days. I hiked. I chopped firewood. I sat in silence and watched the sun rise through the trees. I let my mind wander through every version of my life I'd imagined. The ones where she stayed, the ones where she came back, the ones where I had a real family, the ones where I'd gotten help. And then, somewhere around day 3, I picked up a journal that the last guest had left behind. Inside were a few notes, quotes, even some jokes, but one line stood out. The version of you that they created doesn't have to be the one you become. I read it 3 times. And then I cried. Not the hard, gut-wrenching sobs I'd expected. Just slow, quiet tears that trickled down my cheeks and dropped onto the paper like punctuation. Because that was it. That was the truth I'd been dancing around for weeks. Nancy had created a version of me. One she could control. One she could manipulate. The angry, selfish son who abandoned his family and hoarded his wealth out of spite. And the worst thing I'd done was let it live. Let it shape how I walked into rooms. How I saw myself. I let it shrink me. And I was done doing that. When I returned to the city, I didn't storm back in like a conqueror. I didn't declare war. I just went to work. Real work. I started meeting with our nonprofit partners again, in person, face to face. I told them the real story, not for sympathy, but for context. I owned my silence. I acknowledged the confusion. I didn't drag my mother's name through the mud. I didn't need to. I just told the truth. Then I sat down with my team. I explained what had happened. The fake posts. The login breach. The scholarship fraud. The personal fallout. And I told them what I planned to do next. We rebranded the internship program. We implemented background checks, personal verification, and clearer protocols. I created a scholarship fund, not just for tech students, but for anyone from a home like mine. Kids who'd been left behind. Kids who were told to figure it out. We called it the Bridge Grant. And I didn't put my name on it. But I did write the first check. $10,000. Anonymous. For a first-year student who'd been living out of her car for 2 months while still getting straight A's. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't revenge. It was a start. And it felt right. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet about Nancy. About Jason. Let the gossip fade. Let the noise die down. People move on, after all. Especially when there's no drama to feed on. But I didn't forget. Because while I was rebuilding myself, I was also laying a foundation for something else. Something careful. Something legal. Something permanent. I'd hired a private investigator, discreet, professional, and meticulous, to pull every thread connected to the forgery. Emails, IP logs, application submissions, phone records, everything. And what he found was bigger than I ever imagined. But I'll get to that soon. For now, just know this. Rock bottom isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Still, a place where the dust finally settles, and you can see what's left of you in the rubble. And if you look closely enough, you might just find a blueprint. Not to go back, but to build something stronger. Something no one can take from you. Especially not them. You'd be surprised what people leave behind in their digital footprints. Old email addresses, recycled passwords, shared cloud drives from years ago. Even a stray document with the wrong metadata can open a door. And once it's open, you can't unsee what's inside. After I got back from the cabin, things didn't return to normal. They moved forward. I wasn't the same guy who'd flinched when my mom's name showed up on my phone. I wasn't the abandoned teenager trying to prove his worth in silence. I was 31, legally armed, emotionally grounded, and, for the first time in my life, ready to confront this thing head-on. Not with anger. With precision. You see, it wasn't just about the forged letter anymore. Not after my private investigator, Curtis, called me late one Wednesday night with a file so damning I had to pull over just to process it. I wasn't expecting this deep a trail, Curtis said, voice calm but tense. But your mother's been using your name for a lot longer than we thought. How long? At least 3 years. Silence. I was parked outside a Thai place, engine still running, food getting cold in the passenger seat. The phone pressed against my ear felt heavy. What kind of usage? Credit. Business referrals. Personal favors. There's a rental application from last year that used your name as a co-signer. Someone forged your digital signature. There's also a donation to a local gala event last spring, supposedly from Colin, CEO of Everett Tech. I pulled the tax documents. It was registered under your name. I let out a low breath, heart thudding. Is Jason connected to any of it? Curtis hesitated. That's the thing. A lot of these events, fundraisers, campus partnerships, even social media push, they all list Jason as the beneficiary. He's using the image of being your intern, your mentee, your brother. These people think he's part of your business legacy. It hit me like a punch. They weren't just name-dropping me. They were building a brand off me. I thanked Curtis and asked him to compile everything. Emails, screenshots, legal documents, social media posts, financial links, the works. He sent it over in a secured folder titled Operation Broken Bridge. I didn't ask him to change the name. It felt fitting. The next step wasn't rage. It wasn't confrontation. It was strategy. I started by tightening every bolt in my company. I hired a cybersecurity firm to sweep our digital infrastructure. We found 2 outdated credentials still linked to Nancy's email, plus an old Dropbox folder from my startup days that I hadn't touched in years. Guess who had been accessing it? From that folder, we traced 3 PDFs and a company deck that had been used in another presentation. This time not by Jason, but by Derek, my mother's husband, at a family-owned startup panel hosted by a small business incubator. Derek had introduced himself as the original investor behind Everett Tech. I nearly laughed out loud. But that's when it clicked. This wasn't some fluke. It wasn't one fake internship or a borrowed password. This was a long-game identity grab, subtle, quiet, incremental. They didn't want to take over my company. They wanted to link themselves to it just enough that when Jason launched his own career, it would carry my reputation with it like scaffolding. My mother hadn't come back into my life for guilt or reconnection. She'd come back because I had value again. And the scary part? It was working. They were hosting events, booking panels, getting speaking engagements, all built on the illusion that we were one big tech-savvy, tight-knit family. And now that I saw the whole puzzle, I knew what I had to do. I had to take it all down, publicly. But not right away. Not angrily. Not emotionally. Carefully. Legally. Surgically. The first thing I did was reach out to an old contact from a podcast I was featured on years ago, Layla. She ran a tech media channel focused on startup origin stories and entrepreneur exposés. We'd kept in touch loosely, and I knew she had a strong nose for drama and a strict code of ethics. I sent her a simple message. I think I've got a story. Not about me. About the people who tried to rewrite my story as their own. She replied in under 5 minutes. Tell me everything. I'm all ears. I told her enough. Not everything, not yet. Just the surface-level fraud, the internship lie, and how my company's image had been used for personal gain. She asked for documents. I told her I'd send them when it was time. In the meantime, I needed to make my move in private. So I created a timeline, a clear map of what they had done, when, and how each action connected to my name or reputation. I used sticky notes across the walls of my home office. Blue for Jason, red for Nancy, yellow for Derek, green for any business or institution they'd interacted with using my name. The wall looked like something out of a detective drama, and the more I mapped it, the more disgusted I became. But I also felt something else. Control. Every connection on that wall was a string I could pull. Every forged link was a chance to cut off their access and expose the lie. And one piece of that web gave me an idea. At one of the events Jason had attended, a tech youth summit in a neighboring state, he had spoken on a panel titled From Mentorship to Partnership, Building with Family. According to the event's flyer, he was listed as Everett Tech Junior Advisor, a title that did not exist, and the summit had been recorded. That's when I made the call that would change everything. I reached out to the event organizer, a woman named Kim, and told her there had been a serious misrepresentation on one of their panels, one that could expose their organization to legal liability. I was calm, respectful, told her I wasn't looking for a lawsuit, just the raw footage of Jason's talk. She hesitated at first, but eventually agreed to share it privately. And when I watched it, my stomach turned. Jason stood on stage, smiling, confident, dressed in a suit that didn't quite fit right, but tried to scream tech mogul. And then, in front of 100 students and 3 local news crews, he said, I've been lucky to grow up in a family that's deeply involved in innovation. My older brother founded Everett Tech, and I've been helping behind the scenes since I was 16. We brainstorm together, collaborate on social initiatives, and share a vision for the future. Not a single word of it was true, but it sounded so real. And I knew, watching it, that this was the moment. This was what I'd use to burn it all down. But first, I needed to gather allies. I started making quiet calls, reaching out to every institution, nonprofit, and business that had interacted with Jason, Nancy, or Derek under my name. I didn't threaten. I didn't accuse. I asked questions. When did you first hear about Jason? Who introduced him? Did he say he was employed with Everett Tech or just affiliated? Can you send over the forms he submitted? I framed it as an internal audit, which wasn't a lie. I collected dozens of emails, signed documents, and references, many of them falsely attributed to me. One application even listed me as a personal guarantor for a startup accelerator grant. That one, it had a signature forged using my old signature from a 2016 TEDx waiver form. They dug deep. But so had I. And now I had it all. The paper trail, the digital breadcrumbs, the recorded footage, the falsified applications, the tampered donation records. And most importantly, I had the truth, which, when weaponized properly, when timed properly, is more powerful than anything they'd ever stolen. But I wasn't going to drop it all at once. I needed a stage, a moment, a mirror, big enough for everyone to see who they really were. And that opportunity came faster than expected. I got a mass email from an old alumni listserv at my high school. Inside was a glossy flyer for a charity banquet happening next month, hosted at a local arts center. Black tie, silent auction, dinner, the whole thing. But what caught my eye was the theme. Building futures together, honoring family legacies in entrepreneurship. And there, listed as guest speakers, right between the mayor and a state senator, were Derek and Jason Whitaker. I stared at that email for a long time. Then I smiled. Because for the first time in this whole twisted saga, they had invited me to the stage. They just didn't know it yet. And I was going to make sure they'd never forget it. The night of the banquet felt like the final scene in a movie I never wanted to star in. It was cold, crisp, and calm. One of those early spring evenings where you can still see your breath, but the air doesn't bite quite as hard. I parked a few blocks away from the venue, the old arts center downtown, and walked the rest of the way. I wasn't nervous, just still, focused, like everything in me had narrowed to a single point. I wore a simple black suit, no tie, clean-shaven, composed, the type of look you wear when you want to make sure people listen and don't just look. The venue was buzzing when I stepped inside. Round tables dressed in white linens, a silent auction area off to the left, soft jazz playing near the stage. Waiters wove through the crowd with glasses of champagne and miniature crab cakes. All around me were donors, faculty members, local business owners, city council reps. Everyone smiling, congratulating, networking. I kept to myself. For now. The program booklet sat neatly on each table, printed in gold script. Building futures together, honoring family legacies in entrepreneurship. And right there on the second page was a full spread titled Featured Family Spotlight, The Whitakers. A glowing 2-page bio of Derek and Jason. Photos of Jason shaking hands with community leaders. A paragraph about how their family-first philosophy had shaped Jason's journey in the tech world, complete with a quote falsely attributed to me. Jason's work reflects the spirit we've always valued at Everett Tech. Colin Everett. I smiled. It was the last time that quote would ever see the light of day. The event kicked off right on schedule. Dinner first. Speeches after. I sat near the back, alone at a table meant for overflow guests who RSVP'd late. No one noticed me. Not yet. The lights dimmed. A few short speeches rolled by. Light applause. The occasional forced chuckle. Then the MC took the stage again. And now, for our main presentation of the evening, he said. Please join me in welcoming a family that embodies the spirit of mentorship and innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, Derek and Jason Whitaker. Applause. Not thunderous, but polite. Polished. They stepped on stage together, all smiles. Derek in a too-tight blazer. Jason in a tailored suit and shiny dress shoes, looking like he belonged on a college brochure. They spoke about building legacy, about lifting each other up, about how family can be the ultimate business partner. I waited. Let them talk. Let them soak in every nod of approval, every clap, every sip of admiration. Then, right as Jason was saying, when I interned for my brother Colin, I stood up, quietly, and walked toward the side of the stage, where the event coordinator, a woman named Meredith, was standing by the AV table. I tapped her shoulder gently and handed her a flash drive. She blinked at me. Can I help? I'm Colin Everett, I said softly. That drive contains proof that the guests on stage have built their entire story on fraud. Her eyes widened. I pulled out a manila folder and handed it to her. Inside was a letter from my lawyer, already reviewed by the event's legal team earlier that week after I gave them a heads up. It outlined every falsified claim, every forged document, every unethical use of my name. The AV tech looked at Meredith. She gave a slow nod. And that's when the screen behind Jason flickered. He didn't notice at first. Neither did Derek. They were mid-sentence, basking in the glow of self-congratulation, until the first slide popped up. The real story behind the Whitaker legacy. The room shifted. People turned. Murmurs. A few confused laughs. Jason looked behind him. His smile froze. The next slide was a screenshot of the fake scholarship letter with my forged signature. Then a video clip of Jason's Tech Summit speech, with a caption that read, "Every word you're about to hear is a lie." Then an email chain showing Nancy submitting documents on my behalf. Then the Instagram ad, the one with Jason wearing the Everett Tech hoodie, claiming to work for me. Derek stepped forward, hands raised. "There seems to be a technical issue." "No," Meredith said, taking the mic calmly. "There's no issue. But there has been a correction. We were misled by the Whitakers. And the person whose name was used without consent is here tonight." Every head turned. Jason stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. I walked down the side aisle, hands in my pockets, eyes on him the whole way. No anger. No smugness. Just calm. I took the mic from Meredith. "I'm Colin Everett," I said. "Founder of Everett Tech. And the man they've been lying about for 3 years." Silence. Not a whisper. You could hear the clink of a dropped fork. I told the room everything. Briefly, clearly. The faked internship. The forged documents. The scholarship fraud. The social media manipulation. I even showed the evidence. I didn't embellish. Didn't attack. I let the facts do the talking. And when I was done, I looked directly at Jason. "I didn't come here to embarrass you," I said. "I came here to end it. You tried to build your future on someone else's past. But that past was built without shortcuts, without lies, without family support. You don't get to inherit that just because it's convenient now." He tried to speak, some garbled defense about being misunderstood, but no one cared. Not anymore. The fallout started immediately. The banquet organizers issued a public apology before dessert was even served. The MC skipped the closing speech. Guests began leaving in clusters, awkward and stunned. By the next morning, the story was trending on local news outlets, thanks to Layla, who had received the full dossier from me just before the banquet, along with clearance to publish after the event. Her article went viral. Family fraud, the startup lie that fooled a city. Within 48 hours, the scholarship committee revoked all funding tied to Jason. The university opened an investigation into falsified academic and employment claims. Derek's seat on the Small Business Advisory Board was suspended indefinitely. Nancy's involvement in the forgery, backed by emails and login traces, became part of a civil suit my lawyer filed the next day. But none of that brought me joy. What did? The voicemail, left by Nancy 2 days later. I hadn't blocked her yet. I wanted to hear it. "Colin," she said, her voice shaking. "Why are you doing this? We're family. You're destroying everything. Jason's future, Derek's reputation, our lives." A pause. "I just don't understand how you could be so cold." I didn't respond. I just saved the message. Because it proved what I always knew. She only saw value in me when I was useful. Never when I was hungry, alone, 17, and sleeping with 2 hoodies on because the heat had been shut off. Never when I was walking to school with holes in my shoes. Never when I sat on the edge of my bed wondering if I mattered to anyone. But now I mattered. Not because of who she thought I was, but because of who I became in spite of her. In the weeks that followed, I stayed out of the spotlight. Let the legal process take over. Rebuilt the company's image, not with PR spins or slick messaging, but with transparency. Honesty. We released a formal statement. Donated to the nonprofit Jason tried to scam. Doubled our internship budget and started a new mentoring initiative with one rule. You don't need family to make it, just the truth and the will to work. We named it Project on Your Own. And as for Nancy, I haven't heard from her since. The last I saw, her Facebook went dark. No more margaritas. No more yacht selfies. Just silence. Jason's LinkedIn vanished too. Derek's entrepreneur talks stopped showing up on event calendars. They disappeared, not in some fiery explosion, but in a quiet unraveling. And me? I'm still here. Still building. Still working. Still walking into rooms without flinching. Because for the first time in my life, I'm not running from the past. I'm standing exactly where I belong. And when people ask how I did it, I smile and say the same thing every time. I figured it out on my own.